Cleveland Browns wide receiver Amari Cooper is looking for a contract extension, which he's entitled to. But the reality is, it looks like the Cleveland Browns are already building the future of their wide receiver room. We'll talk about it. Your latest Locked On Browns starts now.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound, LGB on the LOB, the Locked On Browns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, Jeff Lloyd. We are joined today by the OBRs, Pete Smith, and I appreciate everybody who makes Locked On Browns their first listen every single day. Join the everyday crowd, subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Of course, the show is always available. It is always free wherever you get your podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. As I said, the OBR Pete Smith is in. Obviously, for all you Ohio folks, high school football is underway. Summer goes quick in some parts of the country, but it is time to get to business. We are less than, I guess it's now 10 days away for the Cleveland Browns rookies reporting for training camp. Next day, the veterans, and then, of course, obviously a trip down to the Greenbrier in West Virginia once again, where last season's magical run started, hoping for the same type of recipe for success this year. Amari Cooper, in what has become a saturated monetary market for wide receivers in the NFL, looking to get himself some guaranteed money beyond 2024. Certainly understandable from Amari's case as far as not having to play basically on a lame dunk contract. God forbid something were to happen to him. You certainly look at the success that Amari's had the past two seasons in Cleveland, keeping in mind that it was always basically a revolving door for who was playing quarterback week in, week out for Amari Cooper's first two seasons here with the Cleveland Browns. But Pete, there is a resolution that's going to have to come here. I don't think it's going to be anything where Amari sits out, anything of that nature, but it's going to be probably a resolution between player and team, of course. But the Cleveland Browns, there's been a lot of legwork done in the last couple of off seasons to get this wide receiver room where it is. And also notwithstanding the fact that, the Browns now will be much more pivotal and much more involved in the NFL draft this upcoming year with all the picks they have, having a first round pick again. So it's an interesting, talking point as far as Cooper's stance and certainly the stance from the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, with Amari Cooper, like our reporting is that they know what the number is. It's just a matter of guaranteed dollars. Cooper wants 2 years of guaranteed money, which I get. And the Browns, at least at the time of our reporting, were at just this year, and then giving him basically the same empty contract he had that he's on now, which to me would suggest that you do that, and then he's right back in the same boat, except he's older and has less bargaining power. So there's no reason for him to do that. So it's a matter of coming down to probably getting one more guaranteed year from the Browns, but we'll see where that ends up here in about week and a half. But as far as the wide receiver room in general, the Browns have given themselves a ton of options between getting Jeudy and signing him to a contract extension. He's going to be part of your future. And whether it's Cooper, whether it's an Elijah Moore that signs a contract extension, he's on the last year of his deal, whether it's Cedric Tillman taking another big step forward, you've got Jamari Thrash, David Bell, potentially Michael Woods II. The Browns get a breakout from any of those guys, and they're in a really, really good spot. If two guys take a step forward, the Browns are cooking. And then, yes, as you mentioned, they still have draft picks. They haven't used a pick earlier than the second round since Corey Coleman. So they could go bigger. I don't know if that's where we're going to end up, but those are all great options. So for the Browns wide receivers, they're in a really good spot in terms of talent. They're in a really good spot in terms of depth. And for a team that allegedly, we'll see what happens when the rubber actually meets the road, wants to run way more receivers, especially since it looks like they're not going to carry very many tight ends. They need all those dudes to be able to play, to be able to operate as depth. Because if you're running 4 receivers a lot, guys legitimately just get tired, and guys are going to have to. You're going to need those backup guys to be able to get reps and contribute.
Now, here's the thing, and probably really why Cooper's camp is probably so steadfast on 2 years. If you look at the way this is, Pete, you have to think, and it might not necessarily be any fault of Amari Cooper's, but with all that is there now, Amari might not get the same piece of the pie that he's been accustomed to the last 2 years. Elijah Moore on a contract here, we'll see how that works out. But, the development certainly of Tillman, bringing in Jerry Jeudy, of course, and already basically showing the faith in Jerry Jeudy by giving the extension. And as you mentioned, Bell, Thrash, other guys who are there. I guess if you're Amari, you're trying to cash in now because there could be a pretty good shot that the Browns are still successful next year, but Amari Cooper's production isn't up to what it was his first 2 years here.
It's possible. I mean, I think the Browns.
Well, there could be more overall success, I guess. But yes.
I think the Browns and I think the Browns have to be looking at this as growing the pie with all the issues they had at quarterback. Amari had a phenomenal season, and they weren't good for a lot of the year in terms of passing. Yes, Joe Flacco put up some big numbers. Yes, Deshaun Watson had some big games, but overall, it was uneven and clunky all year. Amari just happened to be the North Star, that one guy you could always count on. So I don't know if that necessarily factors in as much as he is at an age where you've got to get that contract. What is potentially your last big one? Because every day he walks in the building, he sees a walking reminder of how fast your career can go in Nick Chubb. I mean, and Amari has leverage because he had that much. Granted, it only goes so far, but he has the leverage. He's smart to take advantage of it. So I don't know that he's necessarily worried. I think if anything, that would signal he's worried more about the quarterback position than teammates. I think if the Browns can run off 4,000 passing yards or more, there's going to be plenty for him to get. It's just a matter of, and the other part of that is if they're that good, then Amari's going to get less attention. So he's going to have an easier time getting open, easier time making plays. So I don't know that necessarily is much of a factor as much as age, the harsh reality of what injuries can do to your career, and just trying to maximize your leverage when you have it.
Talking about Amari Cooper and the Cleveland Browns, and certainly the contract extension that the Browns probably are comfortable giving Amari, and maybe what Amari would truly like, and mentioning certainly the wide receiver room and who could possibly be players that step up. We're going to get to that, talk about it a little bit further. Breakout players on the offensive side of the ball. Your latest Locked On Browns continues. Appreciate everybody for being along for the ride. I love sports. You guys know I love sports. I was just telling Pete, as much as he wrote me about the New York Mets, currently a playoff contender. But I love sports so much, I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sporting like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Your latest Locked On Browns continues. I am your host, Jeff Lloyd, and I appreciate all of you who make Locked On Browns your first listen every single day. Join the everyday crowd by subscribing to the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. The show is always available. It is always free wherever you get your podcasts. The OBR's Pete Smith is in here talking about Amari Cooper, the wide receiver room, and that brings us to possible breakout players. Very similar. You go back to week 2, Monday Night Football. Pete mentioned Nick Chubb, the devastating injury, and is certainly a situation that Amari Cooper is trying to keep himself out of contractually as far as his career within the NFL and certainly with the Browns looks to continue. But there was a breakout star. It started that night in Pittsburgh. Jerome Ford and I remember, Pete, we made these jokes last summer when we were trying to talk about, how much faith we had in Jerome Ford at the time. And I believe the line was, which one of Jerome Ford's 9 carries was your favorite? Well, there he was, spotlight, Monday Night Football. Obviously finished that drive with a touchdown and 2-point conversion. Later came back with a long 69-yard run. Became not Nick Chubb, but became the best version of his own self, Jerome Ford, a very, very capable weapon in the passing game from the running back position. With offensive line difficulties, he did find a way to put up pretty good numbers running as the offensive line went through so much change, so many injuries, guys coming in off the street. But Pete, it brings us to, what does he look at, and, who are some names that possibly would be guys that you think are going to maybe not necessarily that almost 1,200 yards that Jerome Ford had last year, but who are some guys that look poised in the possibility for them to break out as offensive players for the Cleveland Browns on offense in 2024?
Well, the Browns have everything, fingers crossed, that it's going to be Jeudy. I mean, that's what they're paying him to do.
No, I talked about this yesterday with somebody. Now, when you say Jeudy breakout, does that mean you're getting Amari Cooper type numbers?
No, to me, it's about efficiency. And that's you have to look at through that lens through everybody. I don't know if Elijah Moore is going to have a ton more yards. He could, but I want if he has 600 yards in this offense and they're throwing the ball really successfully, and Njoku continues to be good, and Amari Cooper's good, and Jerry Judy's good. At that point, I'm more interested in your efficiency. Does it feel like it's taking a lot of effort to get the yardage he's getting, or does it feel easy? So yeah, I think I want to see more efficiency. So Jerry Jeudy could get 1,000 yards, and that would be great. But if he gives you a 900 yards, and that's including explosive plays and stretching the field and doing some of that instant offense stuff that we want to see, even though Amari Cooper's still sort of your workhorse in terms of being that true X, then that's all I'm really worried about. But that's the thing the Browns are trying to do with all these receivers, is having this many opportunities for guys to potentially break out and be more effective. And speaking of Elijah Moore, I really like, if the offense goes where I think it's going, I really like this for Elijah Moore. And I don't know what the chances are he's going to end up staying with the Browns, or if he's going to basically have a great season and go on elsewhere. But the fact that you have him as your potentially 4th option behind all those other guys, and he just gets open, if he's better with catching the ball consistently and staying healthy, he's had games where he's been great and then just got knocked out, not his fault, then he could have a good year. But you'd want to look at Cedric Tillman and go, oh, man, he's going to have a breakout year. I don't know what that looks like when you are potentially 4th wide receiver on the depth chart and Njoku's in front of you. But I do hope that he's going to sort of look the part of a guy who you're sort of maybe into the next off season going, man, I can't wait till he gets more touches. That's all I want. I think that's the feeling you want from all these guys, is as opposed to, it's just not yes, this person's making plays, but it doesn't look great, as opposed to Cam Mitchell's sort of the guy that jumps out at me, the guy who always leaves you wanting more. Cam Mitchell only played 200 something snaps last year, and they weren't all great, but he always kept making a play, and you kept going, oh man, Cam Mitchell, I'm happy he's out there. I want to see him do more. I think that's the feeling you want from Cedric Tillman's season this year. And I think he can get there with his size and strength, and just, he's like a tight end in a receiver's body.
No, I remember, and actually, when you were talking about it, when you were out at OTAs or whatever, you look at Tillman, and it seemed very, very odd, that basically the wide receivers went left, the tight ends went right, and that Cedric Tillman did go to the left with the wide receivers, just a ridiculously, sculpted, built guy. Now, you look offensive line here, and I guess we can hit on this here real quick. You're in this weird position because, all signs point to Jack Conklin returning. And being ready to go right out the box. And of course, the Jedrick Wills situation at left tackle, you pretty much know what your interior players are. So it's kind of hard to think that there is a breakout player essentially on the offensive line. Something would have to happen to maybe create the opportunity for there to be a breakout player. But it does leave for a little weird situation with all the promise that DeJuan Jones showed last year, and the fact that you might not know when his next significant playing time is going to come.
Yeah, well, let's start here. If Jack Conklin is like really healthy and like his knee is good and not just sort of, oh, he's back from 2 surgeries, like I'm really confident, or I should say I'm really optimistic based on him declaring he's ready to go, as opposed to we're rolling into August. He's like, man, I got to get out there and get reps. Otherwise, I'm going to be sort of lost in the shuffle. Like if Jack Conklin is Jack Conklin, he's your starting right tackle. He's the best tackle on this team.
2-time All-Pro. Yep.
And dramatically upgrades the running game, which is designed to go to the right, or I should say is best suited to go to the right. At that point, if DeJuan Jones becomes your third guy, he has to rep at left tackle. So if he can do it and he's potentially more stable than Jedrick Wills, boom, long-term answer at left tackle. But like for him, just speaking on DeJuan Jones in a vacuum, he was an above average starting tackle in pass protection as a rookie. He was awful as a run blocker, and it hurt them when they in some of those games. Like the thing I always point to is like DeJuan Jones would have been great in pass protection in that second Ravens game. I think James Hudson the third run blocking helped them win that game. They just crushed the Ravens up front, and he was a big part of that, and it helped them win. So that's where I worry about DeJuan Jones being on the right side. I would love to see him on the left ultimately for the long term if he can do it, and he can get or just get better at run blocking. Like if he can just be a good run blocker. And I think the way the offense is going to change, more down blocking, more duo, more, ISO blocking, as opposed to asking that giant human being to go out and run wide zone. It's unrealistic to me. But like, it's like trying to get out of the way of a battleship. If he's right on top of you, it's over. But if you've got time to get around him, then you can do it. So he's the guy that if he can become a full service player and be a good run blocker, then he is a breakout player beyond what he was doing. Obviously, he earned every bit of all the kudos he got in pass protection, but the run blocking was every bit as awful as he was good in pass protection.
And, it's certainly, something that the Browns themselves, would like an answer on. Is it, more than a possibility that he's the successor to Jedrick Wills? Or is their confidence level high? Otherwise, it creates, a lot bigger, a much bigger question and something you're going to have to deal with all off season long. And the other thing is for the Browns, if it does work and DeJuan Jones could be your successor at left tackle, you were saving a boatload of money because ideally it is one of the, most premier paid positions in the NFL, certainly within the offensive line, and that is your left tackle. And the Browns could have it from a guy third year of a rookie contract where he was drafted in the 4th round. We talk breakout players on offense. Might as well talk possible breakout players on defense. Stick around. Your latest Locked On Browns continues. I'm your host, Jeff Lloyd. Appreciate everybody for tuning in to your latest Locked On Browns. I appreciate everybody who joined the everyday crowd. Subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. The show is always available. It is always free wherever you get your podcasts. We are here with Pete Smith at _Pete Smith _ from the OBR. Pete and the team amping up. Content's coming a lot more quickly and a lot more of it as we are again with under the 2-week window for 2024 training camp to begin. Rookies the 22nd, veterans the 23rd, and we'll see everybody in Greenbrier and West Virginia. Pete, last year, we talked about Jerome Ford. I mentioned Jerome Ford, but last year you had Grant Delpit put together his best year as a pro. You had Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah put together his best year as a pro. Greg Newsome put together his best year as a pro. Martin Emerson came off a great rookie season, followed it up with a stellar sophomore campaign. I tried to do this myself, this exercise, and, trying to say who could be a breakout guy. And, in looking at what the Browns have on defense, there's not necessarily a lot of guys that could qualify. As you said, there were players, certainly, Cameron Mitchell last year who started to show well, but the opportunity was, he missed time while the opportunity was there for him to get time. And by the time he got back, there wasn't necessarily reps to get. But there's a couple of names that could fit into this for the Cleveland Browns.
So I'm just going to leave Martin Emerson alone because that's the easy answer. I'm going to give you the real answer because if he just regresses to his mean, he will have a bigger year. And that's Ogbonnia Okoronkwo. So if you look at his pass rush win rate from this past year, it was 10.9. Last year, it was 16.6. Now, granted, you could look at that and go, his Texans year was the high water mark. Okay, the 2 previous years were like 13 and 14. So he had, but he's playing a larger role in the defense. So that's probably part of it. So if he just regresses to the 13, 14 area, let alone gets back up to almost 17% as opposed to 11, that's a giant jump for him in terms of production and efficiency, which is huge because as I just wrote in terms of trying to evaluate pass rushers, there are a lot of people who don't like Zadarius Smith because he had 5.5 sacks, even though he's more efficient than any pass rusher the Browns have had since other than Myles Garrett, and I don't know how long. So when you look back and you go, Olivier Vernon and Jadeveon Clowney both had 9 sacks in a season, except Zadarius Smith had more pressures this past year, 60, than Jadeveon Clowney did, 51. Jadeveon Clowney's pass rush win rate was lower, that year was 10.1, which is lower than Okoronkwo. And Olivier Vernon was 53 pressures, I think, to get his 9, and a pass rush win rate a little bit higher. Zadarius Smith was 18.1. He's one of the top in the league, and then to get 60 pressures, if you're talking about just range of outcomes, to only come away with 5.5 sacks, that's criminally low. If he just does that again, he will be very good. So if I carry that over and go Okoronkwo, who I used the comparison, him and Alex Wright combined had 54 pressures and had 9.5 sacks. So again, reasons why I think Smith will have a bigger year if he just does this. But so the collective idea here is that if you just get more pressures from these other guys, that their production's going to go. Okoronkwo had 4.5 sacks, low pass rush win rate, and not, I think, 33 pressures. His calling card last year was really tackles for loss on run plays. So if he just gets back to being himself in now playing a full load of snaps, then I think he's going to have a big, big year in terms of production. And just you feel way better about him as a player. Not that he was bad. I think he had a fine year. But I just think there's a lot more there for him to keep growing. And then, look, I think Greg Newsome's the one that, frustrates the crap out of people because of, how he operates. I personally don't care. I think some of that is you play corner. That's sort of you have to. But Greg Newsome has a lot of good statistics to his claim. He just also gets caught in some of the worst possible situations that make him look way worse than he is. And he's not good in the media in terms of taking accountability. So all these things look bad, but I think part of the reason that the Browns did not really entertain moving Greg Newsome is I think they have to look at him and go, he could potentially break out in this 5th year, and then there are way more bigger offers, and you move him when there's more value. So those guys all coming back for their 2nd year in this system, 3rd year in this setup, I think it'd be really good for Greg Newsome, especially if he starts. Both he and Emerson, I think, qualify for this. Start making more plays on the ball, and some of this man coverage, you're not necessarily looking for them, but there have been opportunities where you're sitting there going, man, they were so close. And I think if they get a couple more of those, then they're going to be way, way more highly regarded in that realm. I think the last one, I don't think he's going to break out, but I do think he could take another step forward and sort of show you why he's a valuable part of the rotation as Alex Wright. Really inefficient last year for the most part, but he's just a big body. He's athletic, and he started figuring some stuff out late in the year. Can he carry that over, take another step, and then make himself a bigger part of the rotation, or I should say a more welcome sight as part of the rotation where you're not, I think last year was better at this, but previous years we were going, Myles Garrett's not in the field. How long are we doing this? that you're like, yeah, we got to get him some rest, but these guys are able to produce and keep the defense effective. Alex Wright has some nice moments. The jet sweep he just hawked down against the Bears stands out as like one of those big plays. I think he's another guy who's figuring it out. He spent, I guess, offseason just following Myles Garrett around smart. So we'll see if that pays off for him. But again, this is sort of the Browns brand of having these giant defensive linemen who can just move up and down the line and do different things.
And I love it from that standpoint because there were times where, like, if you knew Myles Garrett was off the field, whatever subsequent play was going to be run by the opposing offense, you hope that somehow, some way, it involved a booth review. Because it's like, all right, they'll get it by us another extra 90 seconds. He's off the field. Hopefully only one snap. Obviously, we hit on a bunch of people here. We did talk some defensive ends. If you didn't check it out, Pete had a piece out today on Isaiah McGuire, and certainly talked about all the defensive ends within that. So go ahead and check that out over at the OBR. Many thanks as always to Pete. Appreciate his time. Pete Smith, make sure you're following @_Pete Smith _. I am your host, Jeff Lloyd. Appreciate you all for making the show your first listen every single day. If not an everyday or yet, be like an everyday or subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. The show is always available. It's always free wherever you get your podcasts. Basically, summer's over. Back in business, and like, again, the 22nd and 23rd and Cleveland Browns are off to West Virginia, and 2024 is underway. We will be here every day like we have been for the past 7.5 seasons. Well, actually going on eight seasons. Yeah, that's a lot, guys. But I appreciate every single one of you. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. LGB on the LOB. Let's go Browns.